Do you know what time it is? It's supernatural story time. And if you're easily scared, and even if you're not, there's only one thing left to do. Just turn off the lights, because these are stories that you listen to only in the dark. Tales from the Road, Volume 5. I'm a long haul trucker, so I'm pretty accustomed to staying the night at rest areas. Generally, it's just me and my dog, but my wife is a school teacher and is off for the summer, so she invited herself along on my trip from California to Florida. I'm not able to make as many miles in a day as I'm used to when the wife tags along. Too hard for her to sit in a chair for too long with what her arthritis and all. So I try to make most of it, and we'll get a hotel for her most nights. Tonight was different, though. We stopped for dinner at a Buc-ee's outside of San Antonio on Highway 10. I'm very familiar with this route as I've been driving trucks in the southwestern states my entire career. After about an hour of driving, after our stop, I noticed something strange. Not only did the section of highway we were on not look familiar to me, but I noticed that we hadn't seen another vehicle on the road in quite some time. Now, of course, I played it calm, not letting my wife know how confused I was as I scanned the scenery for anything familiar. To make matters worse, my Garmin and cell phone had no service. It was starting to get dark, so I promised myself that we would stop and get a room for the night at the next motel we came to. We drove for almost 2 more hours, and we still hadn't passed another vehicle. Luckily, my wife was asleep, or she would have been panicked, just like I was becoming. Because honestly, at that point, it would have been impossible to hide it. My fears were quelled a bit when I saw the first sign for the rest stop. It was only 39 miles away. Sure, it wasn't ideal, but at least it would be a safe place to stay for the night. My wife could take my bed in the sleeper cab, and I could sleep in the driver's seat. I had done it before, and the discomfort would be worth getting a fresh start in the light of day. When we pulled into the rest stop, I at once knew that something was off. First of all, the rest area seemed to be brand new, but there appeared to be no outside lighting whatsoever, only the faint flicker of lights from within the restroom themselves. Secondly, the lot was absolutely vacant, aside from another tractor trailer that looked as if it hadn't been operational since the mid-'80s. In any other state, that wouldn't be too odd, I suppose, but sleeping overnight at rest stops in Texas is legal, so usually you're lucky to even get a parking space. That's another thing that worried me, though. I hadn't seen a road marker in so long that I wasn't entirely sure I was even in Texas still. By this time, my wife had woken up, confused as to why we were at a rest stop as opposed to Motel 6. I explained, leaving out the fact that I was confused beyond any confusion I'd ever felt in my life. I just told her I had taken a slight detour that would speed up the trip by about half a day. She nodded, but her nod was accompanied by a grimace, and I knew she was having a flare-up from her arthritis. She said she was okay, just needed to go to the bathroom and take her injection. I offered to come with her and assist her, but she waved away my offer. Despite my uneasy feelings about her going alone into a bathroom at a rest stop that I was honestly felt afraid to be at, she went anyway. While my wife was in the bathroom, I did the husbandly thing of making up her bed in the sleeper cab. When I was finished, I turned toward the restrooms expecting to see my wife walking back. Worried about my wife at this point, I grabbed my mag light from underneath my seat and got out of the cab. Walking towards the bathroom, I noticed that the interior light on the other tractor trailer had been turned on. I thought that had been abandoned, so the trucker and me decided to run over and see if he needed any assistance. In the back of my mind, I felt bad about not checking on my wife first, but she was fine, I was sure of it. She probably hadn't even been gone that long. My mind has a way of losing track of time, which is a blessing when you drive 16 plus hours a day. I knocked on the cab door, but received no answer. I stood up to look through the window, but it was so dusty and grimy, it was impossible to make out any details. I'm not really sure what possessed me to do that, but I opened up the cab door. The smell hit me like a ton of bricks. It was beyond anything I'd ever experienced in my life. I took the handkerchief out of my back pocket and tied it around my mouth before I explored more. The floor was littered with old newspapers and empty fast food wrappers, but nothing that would account for the horrid smell. I opened the curtain that separated the cab from the sleeper area and discovered a badly decomposed body. It had obviously been there for years. I was about to leave, get my wife and drive as far and as fast as I could. That's when I noticed that the corpse was wearing my wife's wedding ring. Update. It's been about 14 hours since I found the body in the truck. I'm not really too sure what happened afterwards myself. After I saw the ring on the corpse, my heart sank. The ring was unmistakable to me. When I had decided to propose to my wife, I called in a favor to a jeweler friend of mine, and he helped me design a ring specifically for my wife. That was the ring I saw on the corpse. But it wasn't just the ring. The corpse was also wearing the exact same outfit my wife had been wearing last night, a blue polka dot blouse with a purple cardigan. I ran out of the truck screaming my wife's name like a madman. I ran into each bathroom stall, praying she was all right, and this was just some awful nightmare. I'm not sure if I made the right decision or not, but I got into my truck and I drove. I drove, and I eventually came to a small diner that was no longer in operation, but miraculously was able to get service on my cell phone from there. I attempted to call the police first, but the signal strength wasn't strong enough to make an outgoing call. I'm not even sure what I would have told them if I had gotten a hold of them. That I abandoned my wife at a rest stop that I wasn't even sure the location of. So help me, I abandoned my wife. What if she's lost in the woods or worse? I was able to catch up on some much needed sleep though. The funny thing is, the sun still hasn't come up. Story number 2. 1 year ago I lost my best friend. Heart attack, they said. And they screamed for help. 1 year ago I received this email. Robert would have wanted you to read it. I wish you would have called. I miss you, Rob. My friends, I really hope you get this. I hope that this is all just some sort of bout of insanity. But if not, if something happens to me or if you don't hear from me by tomorrow, I want you to go to the police and show them this email. Tell them that they were wrong. And please, if you can, forward this email to as many people as possible. This is not a joke. At least, I really think it isn't. I'm not pranking you. I swear to everything I hold dear that this is not a prank. If you get this email, I thought about calling you, but I hope that this is all over in the morning. I hope that this is just something special about this night. And if it is, please forget about it or make fun of me. I don't even care. I'm sitting in the Walker's joint near the motorway, the one that's open all night and busy all night, because the last thing I want to be is back on the street. You know, I don't believe in God, but every few minutes I just close my eyes and pray that this will end. The police said I must be hallucinating, and to be honest, right now I think that maybe I am. They checked the house, 2 of them, with drawn tasers, and they came back out laughing, holding a gray wig with long curly hair. I swear, I'm not on any drugs. I had a glass of eggnog with my colleagues, but that's it. I didn't take anything. That's your old woman, they said. Someone put it over the kettle. They threw that wig at me. I jumped back and it fell on the floor. An old woman. That's what I told them I saw. That's what I thought I saw. I finished work at around 10:40 p.m. The others were going to go out together, but I was starving and just wanted to go home to defrost the pumpkin pie my mom froze before she went on her trip. There were kids everywhere on the first few streets that led away from the shopping center, shouting trick or treat at me as if a student has his laptop bag filled with sweets. So I was happy when I turned into Mayflower Road and there were no kids. I was happy that the street was empty. I walked casually, kicked some trash and then some burnt bundle of clothes out of the way. I was really relaxed until a moment after that, when I walked past that house. The one that burned a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, and where the roof is not completely gone. Number 31. I didn't even look at it, and I didn't get any close to it. But when I was about halfway past the house, I suddenly felt this shiver like a spider jumped on my neck and was sliding down my spine, as if someone was watching me. And I swear to God, there was a woman in that window, and she was watching me. I pretty much jumped for 2 steps, and then I caught myself and told myself that she was just some sort of lady that lives on the ground floor and that somehow the ground floor must still be okay. When I looked back, she was still there though. Gray hair and white skin and even whiter eyes. My feet were walking, but that was definitely the fastest I ever walked. I only relaxed somewhat when I turned the corner into Wayward Street. But that shiver running through my spine and that paranoia never left. And the moment I noticed that Wayward Street was empty too, I instantly sped up again. You might have some missed call from me around 11 p.m. Listen, this is the busiest night of the year. There's no way that Wayward Street can be empty at that time. But most of the lights were off, and every time I passed a dark window I felt another rush of cold and another shiver running through my body. Then I passed number 31, and I turned, and she was there. Her teeth were broken but exposed in a wide, lipless grin. And those eyes, God, those eyes, milky white, glassy like a blind person's eyes, but still focused exactly on me. And I ran. I swear, I saw her in more windows. Don't ask me which street or which number, but God, she was there. No matter how fast I ran, she was there, staring after me and sometimes staring at me before I even reached the house. For the love of everything, I swear, there was no one else on the streets. No one. Just dark streets and occasionally a street light or traffic light, and me and her. For a moment, when I turned into my street, I felt safe. There was a young woman in a flower dress pushing a baby stroller. She was walking in my direction. I instantly calmed down. I moved to the side of the house to let them pass. She had her head down, and her dark hair was hanging over her face. They walked by without a word, without a sound even. Seriously, thinking about it now, her steps didn't make any sound at all. There wasn't even that crunching sound that a stroller usually makes. The moment they had passed me, the moment they were behind me, that cold and that shiver and that dread came back. And when I turned, they were gone. And instead, that woman was staring at me from inside a window, not even an arm's length away, with a wide grin. The houses flew by, and I think I saw her in every single window until I reached my parents' house. When I saw that she wasn't in the kitchen window, I ran to the door and slammed the key into the keyhole. Just when I turned the key, I saw her. Her face pressed against the small window in the door right in front of my face. I ran around the corner and called the police. Probably I should have done that earlier. But what the hell do I tell them? There's an old woman chasing me? They'd have laughed at me. The only thing I can remember shouting into the phone is that there was an old woman in my house. They were there 5 minutes later and back out another 10 minutes later with the wig that they threw at me. That's not her, I said. She's real. It's a prank, said one of them. Tell your friends they did an awesome job. I'm serious, I said. This is not just a prank. I told them that I was the last one in that house, that none of my friends have a key, that my mother is abroad, that I was the last goddamn person that touched that kettle, and that there definitely wasn't a wig when I made tea in the morning. Sure, he said, but we have work to do, and fix your number. He was pointing towards our house number. We live in number 13. The 1 and the 3 were switched. They said I should go back in, get a drink, and watch some TV to calm my nerves. They just walked away while I stood outside the house, begging them to please stay or take me with them. The moment they started their car, I turned around and saw her through the open doorway. She stood right in the center of our living room, thin limbs with pale skin wrapped in a ripped flower dress, a wide grin on a face of flaking white skin, milky eyes, but her hair wasn't gray and curly anymore. It was long and black instead. I ran. I didn't see her anymore, and at some point there were people on the street, but I just kept running for at least 30 minutes. I kept running, even when my chest was burning and my legs shaking. until I fell through the glass door and into this horrible plastic chair. The waitress keeps refilling my coffee, and I keep drinking it, just so that she will definitely come back. I can't stop seeing that woman, the legs standing apart, one thin arm stretched towards me, and the other holding something like a rolled up blanket. It's nearly 4 a.m. now. There are a few people here, just a waitress and probably some sort of cook in the other room, and then there are the truckers that keep coming and going. I sit in the center of the room, away from the windows, but for the last half an hour, when I look up and through the window behind the next table, I keep seeing a woman pushing a stroller on the other side of the street. She just pushes it to and fro over and over again. Long black hair. She wears a white dress with blue flowers, but she doesn't smile anymore. I asked the waitress to look, but that moment she was gone. When the waitress walked off, the woman was back. At this moment, she's still walking back and forth, and every few minutes she stops and pulls a bundle of blankets or clothes out of her stroller, and then she stares at me. And every time she does it, she seems angrier. I'm sorry if all of this sounds insane. I'll try to stay here and awake, and hopefully they don't kick me out at some point. I just don't want to go out there. I'll send you another email in the morning, if I'm okay. Story number 3. This is a second-hand account from a conversation held at a 24-hour diner. It was summer and the air was thick with the electricity of a thunderstorm. My best friend and I were craving midnight pancakes, so we booked it to Pop's Branding Iron, a Western-themed restaurant towards the edge of town. It was right between the late night and early morning hustle. There were few people eating, and the staff was red-eyed and tired. My friend and I sat down and ordered. It was nothing out of the ordinary. A few minutes later, they arrived. The door jingled as a bearded man walked in, carrying his 6-year-old son, who looked half asleep, and a backpack. They took the table right next to us, and the place was set for 3. He told the waitress that they were waiting for the grandfather to come pick them up, and they'd have some food in the meantime. He caught us staring, and for some reason decided to engage us in conversation. "Don't ask, it's been a long night," he sighed. I can still remember the tired circle in his eyes. There was a rumble in the distance as a storm approached. I prayed it wouldn't cut the power to the diner. What happened?" my friend Amanda asked anyway. This began a conversation that lasted roughly a half hour. Maybe he was just trying to freak us out. Maybe this actually happened. I will never know, but it was enough to give me goosebumps. Oregon has fairly decent weather in the summer, but at the time the valley had been suffering from a wave of dry thunderstorms. No rain, just flashes and rumbles. Apparently, this has spooked the man's child and gave him many sleepless nights. Once better weather had taken over, the man thought his son's sleep patterns would improve, but they didn't. Apparently, he was woken up many times to see his son standing over him, pale as a sheet. He would ask him, "What's wrong?" And the boy would reply, "They came with a storm, but they're not leaving. Make him go away. Make him go away." "Why? Who are they?" "They wanted in, so I opened the window." The father would check the house, but nothing would be amiss. This continued for about a week, and eventually the boy spent every night in his dad's bed. According to the father, he began to be stricken by a bad feeling whenever he entered his son's room, and it was beginning to spread through the house. Sometimes he would find things moved, and apparently the radio would turn on and off at the randomest of hours. It escalated to that night, when he was awoken to the sound of his son standing straight up in bed. "There's someone in the doorway," he exclaimed. The father was a Christian and tried some spiritual reasoning. "Maybe it's just Jesus come to watch over you." That's when the son turned to him and whispered, "It's not Jesus." The father promptly packed a backpack and called his father. They lived in the low-income part of town and didn't have a car, so they walked a half-mile to Pop's. I didn't want to stay there, it just felt wrong. He murmured to me over a cup of steaming coffee. The building shook to the beat of nearby thunder. The storm had arrived. At the moment, the son, who was originally fast asleep on his dad's arm, opened his pale blue eyes. We all turned to the doorway to see what he was looking at. Pop's Branding Iron has a two-door entrance. The first door leads into a small entryway with a newspaper machine. The second door opens to the actual restaurant. I just watched as the first door swung open on its own. A few seconds later, the second door started to shudder, like something was trying to open it. The welcome bells on the handle jingled wildly. All the restaurant's occupants, not just us, turned and stared. A trucker sitting at the bar turned and reached to open the door, but the waitress serving him grabbed his hand. "Don't." She shook her head. A few minutes later, the rattling stopped, and the door that was opened lazily swung shut. The son went back to sleep, and all of a sudden, I wasn't in the mood for pancakes anymore. 20 minutes later, the grandfather came in to pick them up. Apparently, they were headed to Jefferson for an extended stay. We said our goodbyes and never saw them again. I will never know exactly what happened that night. Maybe the event with the doors was just a coincidence with the wind. But what I do know is of the cross hidden in the woodwork above the door. The door that couldn't open. Maybe something did crawl into their house that night. Maybe not. But whenever a thunderstorm rages outside my house, sometimes I swear I can hear a tapping at my window, a scraping at the screen of someone, something wanting to be let in. Story number 4. My father was a good man, a cautious and reserved man, but a good man nonetheless. I buried him 2 weeks ago, an event that filled me with enough sorrow to last a lifetime. Death is the real villain of the world. He takes and takes and takes, and most of the time his victims are not ready, let alone their loved ones. My father lived to help people. He would give the shirt off his back to help a person in need. In fact, he has, on 2 separate occasions. You ask any child who their hero is, and most will no doubt say some popular comic book superhero like Superman. But me, I always said it was my dad. To this day, he was my role model, my hero. Being an only child, it was my duty to go through his things, to separate those that will go to the Salvation Army, such as clothing and shoes, or to keep for memories, such as pictures and knickknacks. 2 days into the rummaging, I found an old manuscript. Now, my father was never one for writing anything, let alone a story, so my interest was piqued. The bent and bowed papers were yellowed with age and stained with what I can only surmise as salty tears drops. After reading his story, I found myself horrified by the realization that this could very well be a true story. I did some digging around and verified that it was, in fact, a true story. I had no idea my father lived through this awful event. He never told me about it, and I'm sure he never told my mother. To live with this for so many years had to have taken a toll on his heart and soul. So without further delay, I will transcribe the story of my father's nightmare. It was Christmas Eve, and my older brother and I were driving across the beautiful state of Mississippi to get to our grandmother's house in time for Christmas Day. The delay was my fault. I all but begged William to wait another day before heading out so I could spend a few more precious hours with my new girlfriend, Allison. The romance was new, and I was trying hard to lay down some foundation to make the relationship last longer than the drive to Nana's house. The drive was long and boring, and through the backcountry roads that are all too familiar in the South, and without the radio playing any music to distract us from the monotony of it all, we decided to play a game called I Spy. Childish, I know, but with nothing else to do and the conversation running stale, it was our last-ditch effort to maintain our sanity. After 30 minutes of I Spy Something Green, tree, nothing but trees, there was something new on the road. I had just started to close my eyes when William said, I spy something. A pause for theatric purpose. I spy something black. That took me aback. Like I said, it was something entirely new, so I looked around. I swiveled my head to look behind us, and that's when I saw it. The most gigantic black truck I have ever seen in my 17 years on this earth. The headlights weren't on, but it was only beginning to be dusk, so that was no big whoop. The body was black and shiny and sleek. 2 tall smokestacks pointed to the sky, one on either side of the truck behind the cabin. The windows were all tinted, even the windshield, it looked like. I could not, no matter how hard I tried, see into the cabin of this titan of a truck. At first, the truck was about 100 yards behind us, but almost immediately it started to gain on us. It does happen from time to time. People on back roads, without worry of being pulled over, like to race and speed and really let it out there in the wilds of Mississippi. I was a bit excited. A smile was on my face, and I knew so because William said to me, "Donnie, what the hell are you so happy about?" But his face did look a bit worried beneath the facade of brotherly looks. Of course, I didn't see that then. I was too naive to see that. "That huge-ass truck!" I almost shouted. He then gave me another look, one that said I should watch my language. As the truck got closer, so did the engine get louder and louder. The only other engine I ever heard that was that loud was from a Mack truck. This was no Mack truck, however. It was only about 2 car spaces away from us when I again tried to consider the cab of this wondrous truck, and again I saw nothing but black. I started imagining who these people may be. I imagined the driver was on his way to a monster truck rally, or was it a roadie for a NASCAR driver? I pictured a bearded white guy with a trucker's cap on and a snubbed cigar in his mouth. He was probably nice to young kids and made sure they got autographs from their favorite drivers. As the driver accelerated, black smoke spewed from those tall chrome smoke stacks. The large truck inched closer and closer to our long station wagon. As the hood of the black truck got so close to the rear end of our car that it almost kissed it, the engine was so loud that even if we could listen to the radio, we would not be able to hear it. I was covering my ears with the palms of my hands when my brother cranked down his window and motioned for the truck to go around him. I couldn't even hear metal on metal when the truck almost gently slammed into our rear bumper. I was frightened, and when I looked at my brother, I could see on his face that he was frightened as well. We didn't know why this truck would slam into us. Was he angry that William motioned for him to go around? If so, why would he be? It was just courtesy. The black truck slowed down again, as if it was going to go around us. It didn't. It sped right up, black smoke spilling out around it, and slammed into the rear of the station wagon again, this time even harder. "Why is he doing this, William?" I remembered saying, with tears streaming down my face. He didn't answer, probably too focused on trying to avoid another potentially fatal encounter with this black titan of a truck. The truck again slowed down and this time drove into the left lane beside us. The windows were indeed tinted so black you could see the setting sun reflect off it. For a moment I thought the driver or passenger was going to roll their window down to yell obscenities at us. But that didn't happen either. The truck just stayed beside us, keeping up with our speed. With the start of this assault, I noticed my brother had sped up to almost 80 miles per hour. After what felt like forever, the truck looked as though it was about to pull forward and hopefully leave us alone. But of course, life is never that simple. The humongous black truck slammed into the side of our car with such force that my brother involuntarily swerved off the road and almost crashed the car into the face of the cliff to our right. As William was attempting to drive the car back into the asphalt, the black truck veered over and was pinning our car to the cliff wall beside us. The driver must have been messing with us because the truck only came as far as to ensure the side of the station wagon only grazed the rigid wall of the cliff. The truck then did something we thought it would never do. It sped away from us. We watched with relief as the black truck disappeared into the growing darkness and went right around a curve in the road. I think we both audibly sighed as our bodies started to relax. As the adrenaline began to ebb away, we started to laugh. I know what you're thinking too. Why are they laughing when they could have been killed? Simple. If you have never been in a situation where you face death, it's what you do because it's the only thing you can do. You never quite know how vulnerable and small you are until the moment you face death. Our guard was finally down when we veered around a sharp left curve and saw bright floodlights shining at us. The light was so bright that William swerved a bit, almost making us go off the road again. The lights were coming from the large black truck. This time the truck was stopped in the middle of the only lanes in the road. There was no way around this guy. At almost the last minute I said, "Look, William, there's a dirt road to the right. Go down there." He did. It was the only thing he could do. He sure as hell would stop the car and ask this asshole what his problem was. Even if he did, I wouldn't let him. William made a sharp right turn down the dirt road, clipping the passenger side mirror on a tree. As he did it, he punched the gas, kicking up rocks and dust as we attempted to escape this madman. Almost immediately, as I was looking out the now cracked rear window, I saw the truck coming down the road as well. "He's gaining on us," I remember yelling, as I watched the truck inch closer and closer. The sun was no longer in the sky, and the light of the moon could not pass the impenetrable canopy of trees above. It was pitch black darkness all around us, and William had only one headlight left to guide him. As I turned around to look in front of us, I noticed a soft orange light shining from the instrument panel. "What is that, William?" I pointed to the light. William looked, but only for a second. "Shit, we're on E, probably running on fumes." There was nothing he could do, so he just continued to keep his attention on the dangerous and narrow dirt road ahead of him. I turned back and noticed the black truck was now so close to us that it could almost touch us. Then he sped up with a sudden jolt of power and rear-ended us again, pushing the car forward and to the right. I heard William mutter something under his breath as he corrected the car's bearings. The black truck then slammed into the rear passenger side of the car, pushing us forward and to the left. A tree clipped the left side mirror and scraped the faux wood paneling of the wagon. The truck slowed down dramatically, but William continued going the same speed, trying like hell to get away from the black truck. Literally, out of nowhere, another set of bright floodlights turned on in front of us. This new vehicle was stopped in the middle of the narrow dirt road. "God damn it, what the fuck is this now?" William yelled. But when he smiled and turned left onto an even narrower dirt road, about 100 yards down the road, the car started to sputter. The car was finally running out of gas. It was jerking wildly when the two sets of bright headlights started down the road, one after the other. We came to a small clearing, a dead end, when the car finally gave out and shut down. "Get out, Donnie, now!" he yelled. I was crying. I was sure we were going to die. We both exited the vehicle in a rush and ran towards the dark woods. No flashlight, only light from the car behind us, a light that got more dim as we got deeper into the Stygian blackness. Just at the edge of the dim light of our car, William stopped. I didn't even need to ask. There was a long fall into darkness if we went any further. To jump is to commit suicide, but at that moment the option was still there, running through our fear-racked mind. Why give these assholes the pleasure of torturing and ultimately killing us when we can end it ourselves? Go out on your own terms. "Bonnie, you have to hide. There's an old log down that way, you see it?" He was pointing to our right, and I could see it just past the boundary of the light of our wagon, if I squinted hard enough. "No, I'm not going to leave you here." "You have to. If we both hide, they will look for us. But if only you hide, there's a small chance that they might be satisfied with me and leave you alone." Of course, looking back now, that does make a lot of sense, but at that moment, I wasn't hearing any of it, and I refused to go without him. The trucks were still a way off. It was pitch black darkness, and even floodlights couldn't light everything up. William seated, and we both ran to the large hollow log. "Look inside the log, Donnie, and see if we both can fit." Naively, I kicked it in and followed his instructions when a hard object, probably a fallen branch, hit my head. Somehow the darkness grew darker and I passed out on the soggy ground. I distantly felt my body being dragged across the wet leaves, and then nothing. I don't know how long I was out, but when I came to, I heard loud, agonizing screams coming from the direction of our car. I tried to get up quickly to come to the aid of my brother, but the rush of blood to my head made me dizzy and I fell again. As I wobbled slowly up to the burning pyre that was our car, I saw a now silent figure hanging from the limb of a tree just above the flames. I stayed in the shroud of darkness as I watched 5 figures, cloaked all in black, get back into their trucks laughing. I watched them in anger as they drove into the night, away from my brother. As the bright orange flames licked the tight rope around his neck, it broke loose and my brother fell to the roof of his car. His car that he spent 2 summer savings up for. His very first car, the car that we spent so many good nights in while down at the drive-in theater. The car my brother and I both lost our virginities in. And I watched as those memories floated up to the heavens in the form of ash and flame. I don't remember how long it took me to find an asphalt road, but I did eventually. I followed the signs leading me to a ranger station, where they phoned the authorities for help. I led the county sheriff and two other rangers barely to the charred remains of both my brother and his car. He wholly is unrecognizable now. He laid crumpled on the burnt roof of the car, and I had to turn away. I couldn't see him like that. It was too painful. They took their notes of my account of what happened, and the ranger took me to the nearest town to phone my closest relative. The sheriff and the ranger were really helpful. And then, when I was alone, the ranger took me apart and said, "Look, kid, I don't want to tell you this to scare you, but sometimes we suspect that there's some Satanist devil worshippers around here, and sometimes they do exactly what they did, which is run young kids off the road and bring them out here. I'm not sure that this is what happened, but at this point we really have no idea who they are or why they do this." I never knew my father went through such a horrible event. I can't even imagine how this must have taken a toll on him. You always hear stories of how there's people in the back roads or in hidden away places that do human sacrifice or Satan worship, and you never appreciate how horrible and evil people like that can really be. You only think it's something that you see in the movies. Now I understand why my father never ever went into Mississippi, not even passing through. As I put the yellowing manuscript back into the shoebox it came from, I noticed a new batch of fresh tears already staining its pages. When I realized for how long he carried this secret with him.